Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Truth Will Set You Free show. This show is brought to you by TLBTV and the Liberty Beacon Project. I'm your host, Linda Diane Wattley. And I'm just excited. How would I describe what I am right now? In awe. My guest today is such a unique, empowering individual, Andre Brown.
How you doing?
I am great. Usually I go all out introducing my guests, but you explain yourself so well. I want you to tell us who you are.
You know what? I think that, people don't usually ask me that because I'm just kind of like just all over the place, but I have a podcast called the Man Code Podcast, where we have honest conversation that men have, when we are just amongst each other. So that's something that I do. I'm also a father. That's my favorite title. That's the title that I cherish the most is father. Secondly is I'm a life partner, to a beautiful Black woman. That's something else that's very powerful to me. So out of all of the things that I've ever done, those are the ones that I cherish the most. The fact that I'm a father to two beautiful girls, the fact that I'm a partner to a beautiful Black woman, and I'm also an author. I wrote the book Journey of the Betta Fish, which is, I call it the story of 1,000 Black men and 1,000 Black boys. And I say that based on like all of the work that I've done in the community, and these are the stories that we share in common, but these are my personal experiences. I'm an educated Black man. I'm a activist for our people, and specific, Black men and Black boys to articulate our experiences, and, just a welcome other things, but father and partner are the ones that I cherish the most.
I know you're right too, because the reason why I am so excited is I love to learn things. And one of the things that fascinates me about you is your gift of writing. Your book, Betta Fish. Betta Fish, is that how you say it?
Journey of the Betta Fish, yeah.
Betta Fish. Oh my God. I recommend that book to any and everybody, just from the standpoint to explain how people become who they are without any idea how they got there.
Exactly.
I mean, the way you explain things that people criticize African Americans about is just phenomenal. I mean, the examples that you were able to use, because I really never understood why the African American people were identified as people who can't come together, support each other. But your theory, how you explained that early in the book.
Yeah.
Could you give us an idea of what you said?
You know what? I talk about how through trauma, you lose yourself through that process. You know what I'm saying? And what I wanted to do is nobody has our experience except for us, right? And it's hard for us to understand why we are in the situation that we're in. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to pass that information on to people, because if someone doesn't really understand your experience, they can't have empathy for the situation that you're in. So I wanted to paint a picture into our community to give people a certain insight as to what our experience is. And the thing is, what I realized is that it's very unique in the world, and, from like traveling abroad and things like that, people see what we do, but they don't understand why we do it, and this is like insight that I've gotten from working in the field for over 25 years, and also growing up in the community and having like, mentees for over 20 years that I'm still, you know, I'm still in their lives. You know, I know kids from when they were like in 6th grade, you know, and I was like 19, and I was a mentor to them. They were like in 6th grade, and now they're in their 30s, and they still consider me a mentor. You know what I mean? I have guys that are in their 40s that might be a little bit older than me, but I'm a mentor to them. You know what I'm saying? So in the beginning of the book, I talk about you know, the poem Footprints. You know, it's like the poem Footprints. I used to see it in my you know, at my grandmother's house. I'd go over there, and I remember reading it, and it talked about it was like the story of someone's life, and they were like, I think they were like entering the gates of heaven or something like that. And they was talking to Jesus, and they were talking about throughout their lives there were 2 sets of footprints, but at the hardest times of their lives, those were the times that there was only one set of footprints. And he said, why in them hard times did you abandon me? And Jesus was like, or, you know, God was like, those are the times where I carried you. And I compare my experience to that because I've carried hundreds of people in the times where it was the hardest for them. So when you carry somebody during that time or you support them, it's like you went through that experience with them. So you gain that insight from that experience. And I've done it for, you know, so it's like, I don't have any sons, but at the same time, I've lost sons in the street. You know what I'm saying? Because I was with the person and I had the relationship with the person. So I felt that situation, even though it wasn't my son. You know what I'm saying? So I think that people, what they do is they gauge your age by your experience. But when you help people and you work with people, it's like you are a lot older than what you are because you've experienced so much. You know what I'm saying? And I wanted to kind of share that. And I wanted to share the trauma that we go through and how it affects our quality of life. And I wanted to just address it in a way and paint a picture so people can live that and see it for themselves. You know what I'm saying? Because
when you broke that down, why we go against each other.
Yeah.
You explained that very well.
Mm-hmm. And I was talking about, and that's what one of my first stories. It's called Baptism by Fire. So in the first chapter, which is Baptism by Fire, I talk about how there was a woman who inherited an island from a distant relative. You know, so she hears that this island, you know, she's like, you know, middle class or whatever, but she, you know, now she got a little island. This is like a small island, but she said, okay, tell me a little bit about it, because she didn't really know the relative that well. You know, and they say, oh, you know, the island got coconuts on it. You know what I'm saying? And she's thinking like, man, I'm gonna go to the next level with these coconuts. You know what I mean? I'm gonna go and get some cocoa, so I'm gonna make cocoa butter. I'm gonna get coconut water. You know what I mean? She's thinking all of this stuff, how she's gonna get. It's gonna be tourists there. She's thinking about all of this all these different things about how she's gonna profit from this little island that she got, right? And so she gets some men. They get in a boat and they start rowing out there to the island. And as soon as they take a step off of that boat, it's like all they see is coconuts on the ground, right? And rats running all over it. And she said, what the hell is this? I'm not gonna be able to benefit off this. Nobody wanna come and to no island that's filled with rats. And how are we gonna sell coconuts? The rats eating all the coconuts. What are we gonna do? So she sat there and she thought for a second. Then she told the men, she said, go grab them shovels. And then she had the men to go and dig a hole. So they went and they dug a hole. Then she said, I want you to get all of these coconuts that's half eaten, and I want you to choke them coconuts off the tree. You know what I'm saying? Some of the coconuts off the tree, and I want you to line it up. And I want you to make a line to where it's getting closer and closer to the hole, to lead to the hole. And I want you to throw a whole bunch of coconuts at the bottom. So that's what they did. So the rats started eating the coconuts, and they started leading them down this path. And then they jumped in the hole where all the coconuts were. So what I didn't say, what I left out, is that the hole was lined with a net, right? So the hole is lined with a net, the coconuts at the bottom, the rats go and jump in the hole with the coconuts. So when all of them in there, and it's like they're down there, what the men did is they tied the top of net up. So the rats, they're in paradise. They're down there, they're eating, they're kicking it, they're having pina coladas, they're having the time of their life, right? But after a while, all the coconuts are gone. So then the rats start, they start, getting hungry. You know what I mean? And then they started biting at each other. You know what I mean? So then after a while, a full-fledged war kicked off, right? And they're down there and they're fighting and they started eating each other. And it's like they're screaming and it's loud and it's screeching and the men are sitting at the top of the hole. They're taking bets. They're betting who's going to win. You know what I mean? They're picking. I got that rat right there. And it's going on and on to the point to where they go to the woman and they say, what do you want us to do with this net full of rats? You want us to go and you want us to set it on fire? She said, no. She said, do you want us to take this big net full of rats and coconuts and go and throw it in the ocean? She said, no. She said, what do you want us to do? He said, just leave it. So this is going on. It's first it's hundreds and thousands of rats. It's thousands of rats. Then it gets down to hundreds. Then it gets down to dozens. So right at the point where it's only 2 rats left and they're about to go at it, and the men and cash their bets, the woman goes to them and she said, let them go. And they said, why? Why would you want us to let them go? She said, just let them go. And the men let the 2 rats go that was left, and they didn't understand why. This is my daughter right here. This is who the book was for.
Aww.
So they let them go, and the men said, why would you do that? Why would you let them go after all of this had happened? She said, that's how you change the mentality.
Hi.
Now, when those rats are out on the beach, their taste for coconuts is gone. Now they have a taste for rats. So she let them go. And that is the story. I always ask people, do you think that story is true? And that story is true because that's the story of our people. So that story is a story of trauma, to understand the changing of a mentality and what people would do when they're under that type of duress. So I always ask people, what do you think will happen if those 2 rats walk up on some other rats on the beach eating some coconuts? What do you think is going to happen? Those rats don't eat coconuts no more. Guess what they eat? They eat rats now.
Wow.
So those rats are going to go and attack the other rats. So those one rats, they're going to be thinking like, man, there's plenty of coconuts for everybody. And the other rats are going to be thinking like, I don't want coconuts, I want you. So that's the changing of a mentality through the process of trauma.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you also emphasize that we get stuck in survival mode, and that's one of the aspects of our interactions with each other, that we don't support each other. You said that started like the preteens, you said?
You know what? That's something, the idea of that is something that actually started through slavery. So the story of the rats is actually a representation. I'm sorry, that's my baby.
That's okay.
Go get mommy. Okay.
Oh.
So that's actually like a representation of slavery, because the reason that we have this issue with survival is because we are the descendants of the individuals that had to fight the person right next to them in order to survive. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that's where our mentality and our distrust comes from, because we had to fend for ourselves. And one of the reasons that I kind of wrote the book is to illustrate the fact that people who have never had the issue of having to survive and having to figure out how to go through that process, and a lot of times when you're going through that process, based on the amount of duress you're in, you're going to see the ugliest side of a person in that process. So what it's called a baseline behavior. So baseline behavior is kind of where we are now, right? But you take away our resources and take away like our food, our house, or things like that, and there's only like a little bit of food, and both of us are in the room, and our natural instinct is to survive. You're going to see the ugliest side of us come out of that situation. So you have whole communities where they don't have the things that they need. And it's not only financially or food or housing, but it's also they struggle with, they don't have everything that they need spiritually. They don't have everything that they need from an emotional standpoint. They don't have everything that they need psychologically. So you're going to see the ugliest sides of them people, especially when they're concentrated in different areas. It's just an abundance of despair. So despair and trauma brings out the worst in the personalities of people. And people who've never been through that, that's something that they don't understand. And they can't have empathy for it because they've never been through it. But the issue with that is that those are the ones that come and work with us in our community that have no understanding of what we've gone through or what we've been through.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
But you also said that, you know, people talk about the gangs and how the killings take place, but you said because of the foundation, they tend to put themselves in situations that they risk their life just to confirm that they're invincible.
Yeah. You know what? That's something in a book I talk about. It's a term in like when you're doing counseling, and what it's called compartmentalization. So that's the compartmentalization is when, and you gotta, and I talk to people about this all the time. First thing that you have to understand is that in order to live in Chicago, which is a war zone, you have to look at yourself and look at what's different about you and tell yourself that that's what's going to keep you safe. Whatever you think about yourself that's unique, you have to believe that that's what's going to keep you safe. And that's what's going to separate you from someone else. That's the first thing you have to understand. So when you're talking from Chicago, they say, oh man, Chicago not that bad. As long as you don't gangbang, nobody's going to do nothing to you. But people get killed all the time that have nothing to do with gangs. You know what I'm saying? But that's something that you tell yourself, because if you really believed in your heart that you were just as vulnerable as everyone else, you couldn't survive here. You understand what I'm saying? So on some level, you become desensitized to it. But on another level, when you are unsuccessful at different things, you go and create situations that you can excel at. So you go and create yourself to be a womanizer, which is a situation that you can die from because you're being reckless. Or you go and create the fact that you can outdrink everybody, or that I'm a weed smoker, or that I'm tough. You go and put yourself in a situation because of your low self-value or your low self-worth, to prove to yourself that you're somebody that should be feared or should be respected on a certain level, because you don't have respect for yourself.
And I tell you too, another thing that caught my attention reading your book was when you actually met men who didn't never have to deal with fear.
That's right. That's a chapter in the book. It's called The Old White Man. And this guy, he lived, well, where he worked at, he worked in the area, and that's something that's very unique, or maybe it's not unique, but it's something that's about Chicago, where white people are not, oh my goodness, we had that conversation. Hello, are you there? White people are not the ones that are being targeted. You know what I'm saying? So they can live in an area that's dangerous for black people to live in, but they can live there, or they can come through there, they can go jogging and stuff like that, and they're not the target. See, that trauma, like when I talked about on the beach with the rats, in that scenario, the white people are like the coconuts. Like, I don't have a taste for, and that's like, it's almost like one of my buddies said it's a term called Stockholm syndrome, where you actually have like a love for the people that have oppressed you. You know what I'm saying? And you would never go and you would never attack them because you have like a reverence for them, but you have a self-hatred for yourself. You know what I'm saying? So they know, in our community, people understand that if you attack a white person, they're gonna find you. The police will not rest until they find you, and because people know that, they don't go and they don't deal with white people on that level. And white people understand that, so they don't have fear. So I'm talking to this older white man, and when we leave, you know, and he was a really good guy. I would always say, "Be safe," you know. And like one day he was saying, he's like, "Why do you say that?" And I said, "That's what we say." You know what I mean? We say, "Be safe," like when we leave each other. And we started talking, and he had never experienced a day of fear in his entire life. Even leaving, coming to work and coming in and out of that war zone, he never was afraid. He had never had a fight, and he had never been in a dangerous situation. You know what I'm saying? And to me, understanding how our whole identity is built off of not showing fear and being tough and all this stuff, that's something that is like a survival behavior. You know what I mean? The way you walk, the way you carry yourself, because you don't want to be targeted or be thought upon as being vulnerable. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like, that's when I started understanding, like, man, our life, our quality of life is like really diminished because of this. You know, our quality of life is diminished because other people walk around with no fear, but we walk around with a lot of fear, and things are liable to happen to us. And think about this: when I talked about how many people, when I talked about how many people that I know that have been murdered. You know what I mean? That's not normal for me to know that. That's not normal for me to know so many people that have died at the hands of somebody else. You understand what I'm saying? So that's something that in most communities, that's not something that they know. If you go to like a Jewish community and say, do you know somebody who's been murdered? It's a very good chance that they don't. But I'm talking about when you go to a classroom full of young Black kids, they know people that have been murdered. They know people who are doing life in prison. You know what I'm saying? They've seen someone get beaten up real bad. That's a problem. That's a problem. You know, but for people who don't understand how the toll that will take on an individual who's constantly, you know, and it's like on some level, they don't understand how that ties into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't operate on a certain level when you're walking around afraid all the time, you know? So yeah, that's why I talked about that.
I tell you this, you are very miraculous, because I'm going to tell you something I just can't get out of my mind that I read.
Yeah.
To get to the next question I'm going to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
When you shared the poverty level of life that you experienced,
yeah,
you said you couldn't even go to sleep, that if you dozed off and you opened your eyes, you was looking eye to eye at some beady eyes of a rat.
That's right. That's right.
How did you get through it to get to where you are today?
You know what? That's one of the bigger issues. The issue for me, and this is like where the book comes from. It comes from in counseling. It's a term called the self-actualization point, where you realize that your experience was very unique. You know what I'm saying? And that you have overcome so much. You know what I mean? But the issue with that is that a lot of Black men, excuse me. Can you excuse Daddy for a few minutes? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the thing is about that is that a lot of Black men don't overcome that situation. You know what I mean? That's the issue. Here, go with mommy. A lot of Black men don't overcome that. A lot of Black men have succumbed to that. You know what I'm saying? And it's because of the situation that we're put in. You know, that's why we were talking earlier about why people work so hard and stuff like that, because they're running to never go through that process again. It's the same thing as if like someone was abused. It's like they are going to overcompensate because they never want to feel vulnerable enough for that to happen again. And it's the same thing with poverty. When you're a person that grew up in poverty and you have an opportunity not to be in poverty no more, you overwork yourself, you overcompensate, so that situation never occurs again. You know what I'm saying? But the issue with that is because we don't understand money, then we're really chasing our tail. And when you are in a situation where you have experienced trauma at a young age, it affects your ability to develop critical thinking skills. So when you don't have time and when you have dealt with trauma, what you do is you act instinctively. So that's why a lot of people are in prison and things like that, or they are obese or they abuse because they do what they want, and they lack discipline because of the fact that they don't have critical thinking skills and because of the fact that they're self-medicating.
So how did you find your little exit? You opened that door and walked out.
That's an interesting question. How did I do that? Well, one is and you know what, me and my partner talk about this a lot. I had a certain belief in myself. So I would hear certain stuff and I just believed in myself to the point, and it's interesting that you asked that, because I know a lot of men that are my age, that a lot of things that happened when they were kids, they lost confidence in themselves, and they struggle with confidence now. And if you saw them, you never know it until you talk to them. But their confidence was taken as a young person, and they struggle in the world right now. Now, me, I just believed that I could have better. I can do better. You know what I'm saying? And the thing about it was, the more that I saw, the more I wanted to see. You know what I'm saying? So I went to school with people that had money, even though my community, everybody was poor. I went to like a good school, and I saw, and I had the desire to have those things. I had a desire, I remember when I was in school, and it's like, they said, well, what did you do this summer? Where did you go? And some people was like, oh, I went to California. I went to blah, 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 blah. And I remember thinking, they lying. You know what I'm saying? Because I hadn't been nowhere, right? I remember that, but everything about them said that they had been there. So I wanted to know what that was like. Because I told myself that because I didn't want to believe that I was missing out. But in my heart, I believed that they had been there. So I wanted to be there. You know what I'm saying? But that was just part of it. Another part of it was I learned how to play chess at a very young age. So that was like one of the big things. So when I go and I do like a lot of my coaching and things like that, I have games and stuff like that teach critical thinking skills. So what that meant was, when you play chess, you got to have like a certain level of discernment, and two, you have to be able to strategize. So a lot of pitfalls that a lot of people had, I didn't have them because I already knew that if I did this, I already knew what the outcome was going to be. You know what I'm saying? So that's another thing that helped me to not fall and make a lot of bad decisions.
So as a child, who did you admire?
Who did I admire? To be totally honest, I was like a person who I watched like wrestling. You know what I'm saying? So like a lot of my idea about like what men were, it came from wrestling. You know what I mean? So I used to like watch like Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage and that type of thing. That's what I admired them on a certain level as far as like my masculinity was concerned. When it came to like toughness in real life, I admired my older brother. I got an older brother that's 9 years older than me.
Yeah, he was fearless.
He was fearless. You know what I mean? He was fearless. You know what I mean? And I remember how hard he went when something happened, because at first I was a target. You know what I'm saying? I was a target because I went to Catholic school and turned the other cheek and all that type of stuff, right? But I talked about the situation on the bus, where I had to, and that was my first real brush with trauma, when I had to fight this grown man, and how after that situation happened and I beat this grown man down, and it was like, I didn't go into the details about it on there, but I beat a grown man down, but I felt like that my life was in danger. And this is the thing about that. To put it into some type of context, this was like in the early 80s, and during the early 80s, John Wayne Gacy, this was something that was going on, and the Atlanta child murders. So this was going on. So kids were being snatched. This was like a time where kids were being snatched a lot, and it was all on the news. And what happened was, my mother told me, whatever you do, don't ever be alone with a man, because a man will do something to you. Now, as a woman, and we're talking now, and I'm in my 40s, you can imagine, coming from a woman, why she said that. You know what I mean? Why was she so adamant about that? You can imagine what I found out as I got older, why she said that. But this was the environment. So once I was put in that situation and I reacted the way I did, you know what I'm saying? At that point, when you ask me who did I admire, at that point, I didn't admire nobody. I admired myself. You know what I'm saying? But the issue with that is that caused that one situation caused, like, and I'll put it like this. If a young woman is molested as a kid by a grown man, it's like you have put poison in her spirit. That's what I talk about. And I talk about that later in when I talk about the I don't know if I talk about that in the Journey of the Betta Fish chapter, or I talk about that in the Oracle, like in those chapters. but you poison someone's spirit when you traumatize them. You know what I'm saying? So with a young woman, a lot of times she may become promiscuous. But with young men, when you introduce trauma to them, like a violent trauma, then they become fearless. You know what I'm saying? So my brother was fearless because trauma was introduced to him, and I became fearless. So if I fought a grown man, that's the first person I ever had a fight with. What did you think I cared about fighting kids my own age at that point?
But tell them why you had that fight with him.
Well, he wouldn't let me off the bus. He told me he was going to drop all the other kids off before he dropped me off. And I was going to be alone. This thing that my mother had beat in my head since I was way before the situation happened, that you never be alone with one. So I tried to and he was a substitute bus driver. I didn't even know him. So by him being a substitute, I didn't know him. And the first time I have an interaction with him, he's talking about he's going to keep me. I'm about to be alone with him. I knew that that's what was going to happen. I remember I told you I played chess. So if you drop everybody else off, that means I'm going to be by myself. I don't even know you. You know what I'm saying? And plus my mom is going to be waiting for me. But she already told me this is a situation that you never find yourself in. I don't care what you have to do. Do not. And that's why the situation happened. But at that point, I wasn't afraid. So after that happened, you know what I'm saying? After, like, I had to put hands on this dude and I beat him down, it just gave me confidence that I could beat up any kid, right? But it's another confidence, and that confidence translated in other things like sports. And you know what I'm saying? Because my innocence was lost in that moment. You know what I'm saying? And that's the issue. That's like that's something that I don't think that we look at, the fact that we have to protect our kids, and our kids are the most vulnerable. And these kids that are going out here and they're doing stuff, they've been traumatized. And I don't think that we go and see what these kids that have been traumatized, the circumstances that they have in common, to go and address the individuals that's traumatizing them. You know what I'm saying? So
like you said, though, it's happening from people you're supposed to trust. It's not just a community thing. It's actually within the home structure.
It's within the home. Yeah, it's not like the strangers. The people that are gonna come and do, like, whether it's one thing, and I can tell you this flat out. Illinois has one of the highest highest rates of child abuse in the entire country. That's the first thing. Please understand that. But at the same token, Chicago has one of the highest, that has the largest juvenile detention center in the entire country. You see how that correlates? High abuse with high incarceration of youth. It goes hand in hand. You see what I'm saying? So that's one of the biggest issues that we have in our community, but that's one of the things that we don't talk about. You know, so we talk about my podcast and why I talk about certain things. That's why I talk about it, because we've been trained to only say what people feel comfortable hearing. And I think that the time for that is over with. It doesn't serve our purpose.
And that was an interesting conversation when you were sharing about us growing extinct.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing about what goes on, especially like when you leave and you go to other countries, right? So let me just give you some insight. First of all, I had this conversation, the conversation that we're about to have. I had it with it was an African guy. He's a professor at Chicago State, and this was probably like about 2 months ago. I did not know this guy, and we're talking about this, and I'm telling him just what I'm about to tell you. This dude broke out and started crying. That's how serious the situation is. It's like, because we are stakeholders, we don't want to believe it. And because we're stakeholders, we want to think that this situation is going to change. But I think at the point where you start seeing something, you start realizing it, I think it's too late at that point. So that's my opinion. Now, talking about when I go out of the country and people realize I'm from Chicago, they be like, "You from where?" Chicago. And they go right into asking me, what's going on? What the fuck is going on? Like, sorry about that, but that's what they ask me. What's going on there? Why are y'all killing each other at the rate that y'all killing each other? You know what I'm saying? That's one thing. So that was like, I was just in Cuba and I did a lecture at the University of Havana. You know what I mean? And I posted that on on the social media that we're connected to. But they wanted to know. They know what was going on, but they just didn't understand why. That's how the world is. Everybody knows what goes on in Chicago. They just don't know why. And this is the most powerful country in the world. You know what I mean? But another thing that goes on is that people take pictures of me. And at the point where I was in China, but people took pictures of me like everywhere. But when I was in China, they took pictures of me the most. And I asked myself, I said, if I was them, I said, who would I take a picture of if I ran across them? What race of people would I take pictures of if I just ran across them? And I thought about it, I said, the Native Americans and the Aboriginals. And when I asked myself why, that's when I realized why they were taking pictures. And they understand that our people is headed down the road to extinction. So then I thought about it more. And I thought about the fact that in Chicago, 50 schools in a Black neighborhood closed. But didn't know schools in the Hispanic neighborhood closed. Didn't know schools, because Chicago was segregated. Didn't know schools in the white community closed. The schools in a Black community closed. And when I had this, the reason that they said they closed was people don't want to believe is because the enrollment is low. And people say, well, this is because of charter school, something like that. I said, no, they closed because the enrollment is low. They're not closing in any other community but ours. And I say, how many kids do you have? And most people that you will meet here have one kid or no kids. But their parents had 4 and 5 brothers and sisters. So, and I was talking to an older guy about this earlier. I said, how many of you guys was it? Because when you tell somebody this, they don't want to believe it. So I said, how many brothers and sisters do you have? This guy was probably like 60 years old. He said, I had 2 brothers. I had 2 brothers and I had 2 sisters. Something like that. And I said, and I said, it's 5. And I said, how many kids did you have? And he said, I had 4. And I said, how many grandchildren do you have? And he said, 1. And I said, how many schools closed in Chicago? He said, 54 schools. I said, how many brothers and sisters did you have? He said, 5. I said, how many kids did you have? He said, 4. And I said, how many grandchildren do you have? He said, 1. And I said, you don't understand why the schools are closing. They said because there was low enrollment, and it is low enrollment because we're not having children. One is we're not having children because we don't trust, the Black men don't trust the Black women. Then you have another thing that if we mention it, people will label us. So we're not going to mention it, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. Then all of these murders that are happening that people say that they can't solve, even though we're in the most powerful country in the world, and they found someone that was hidden in the desert in another country that was dug in a hole in the ground, but they can't find people that are doing the murders right here on their own home, on their own soil, so they say. And also because there is a populate, like a lot of the, there's a percentage of the Black men here that are having vasectomies in their 20s because they don't want to have children, because they don't want to have to deal with child support or not being able to see their children. So they go and have vasectomies and decide that they're not going to have kids, so they can keep themselves out of that situation. You know what I'm saying? So that's something that's big that's going on, and they'll have vasectomies and won't tell anyone, and they'll date women and marry them knowing that they can't have children. And this is stuff that I uncover in groups. I didn't realize how big this was until maybe 2 years ago. So that's why our population is on a decline, and people don't understand that. But when you understand population control, then it's giving certain people privilege and making other people afraid. And that's how it goes on, but it attacks poor people first.
So tell us about the Betta Fish.
So this is the thing about the Betta Fish, and this is why I named it the book that. Betta Fish, first of all, they come in all different shapes, colors, and sizes, right?
I had never heard of them.
yeah. Do some research on them. But Betta Fish, they're beautiful. They're one of the most beautiful fish you'll ever see, right? But they cannot be around each other. You cannot have 2 Betta Fish in the same tank. Now, I think they said that 2 females could be in the same tank, but you can't have a male and a female in the same tank, and you definitely can't have 2 males in the same tank. That's something that I know for certain. But they can get along with other fish. So you can put a betta fish in there with a goldfish or different other tropical fish, but you cannot put them in there with each other. So say if you had one betta fish in one tank and another betta fish in the other tank, and you sat them right beside the two tanks right beside each other, those betta fish will keep whacking against that tank, trying to get at each other. So they can't be around each other. And the only time that the male and female can be around each other is when they mate. But as soon as they mate, you have to separate them, because if you don't separate them, then they will kill each other. So because they population operate like this, they're always perpetually on the verge of extinction. Sound like somebody you know.
Wow.
So that's why I entitled it Journey of the Betta Fish, because that's how we operate in the Black community. So the betta fish is my journey through this process, and looking at us as African Americans as though we're all betta fish, but this is my journey because we operate in the same manner.
So what made you have such a strong urgency and passion to reach out to others to help them that has walked your path?
You know what? I think that, well, initially the book started out as letters to my daughters. You know what I mean? I have a 14-year-old, and I have at this time I had a baby girl. You know what I mean? She's 3 now. You know, she runs everything. You know, but like, no, I'm not eating that. I want banana. You know what I mean? Like, she runs everything. But it started out as letters to them. But in doing the different work that I've done, I would tell these stories, you know, whether it was in prisons or whether it was in schools or wherever. And the kids were like, dude, you have to write a book. But that's how the story started. Like, that's how the book started, because it was just going to be letters to my daughters initially, you know. But I think that, you know, it was one of my stories. It was called, what was the name of that story? Because like I don't remember the stories like I used to, as far as like titles that I gave them in the book. But
I remember that one about the mustard.
Oh yeah, yep. But it was called The Frog Stump. The Frog Stump was the story when I realized all of the dangerous situations that I had been in, and how I had like been lucky in a lot of scenarios, because I was talking to a young person and he kept putting himself in dangerous situations, thinking that, you know, because of that compartmentalization, that nothing would ever happen to him. But like I said, that's a mentality that you got to have when you live in a war zone, or you wouldn't be able to operate. And as I'm telling him about the frog stump and about, you know, before you are killed, you don't know that this is about to happen. Because if you knew it was about to happen, you wouldn't be wherever you are, right? As I'm telling him that, I'm thinking about myself and all the times that I had put myself in it. And this was my self-actualization point where I started understanding that it was nothing that was different about me that has kept me safe. It was luck. And then I also realized about all of the men, the Black men, that were not as lucky as me. You know what I'm saying? That I'm dealing with on a daily basis. So in church, they'll call it, this is your testimony. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted to give like a certain testimony, but I definitely wanted to be a clinical component to it, to address why it's going on and why we think like that, and how we're desensitized from what the reality is. And our circumstances are desensitized from us because we have to be desensitized, or we wouldn't be able to survive. It's a survival thing, you know. So that's why I wanted to tell that story.
So how did you manage to balance? Because you have a pretty good balance.
You know what? I think that that's something that's false, because I don't have balance. You know what I mean?
Really?
I don't, because one thing that my partner and I talk about, and I was talking about it with a woman that I've known for a long time, is that, sorry about that.
It's okay.
You asked me a question and I wasn't honest with you earlier. I thought my battery was charged, but it's not. But that's okay. We'll do the best we can. I don't have balance, like, because let me tell you, when you grow up, like I grew up, you're gonna know yourself. It's gonna take you some time or whatever, but you're gonna figure out who you are. You know what I'm saying? And one thing about me is that I have like a certain belief in myself that it kind of supersedes. It's not like a normal belief. You know what I'm saying? So when you go through different, and this is like the same thing with, I'm not gonna say compartmentalization, but when you go overcome a lot of stuff, right? The more you overcome it and the more you figure stuff out. If you read Robert Greene's, no, it's not, his name is not Robert Greene, Robert Kiyosaki's book, he said that the more you figure out stuff, the smarter you become, right? So I've overcome a lot of stuff and I figured a lot of stuff out, right? So it gives me more confidence in who I am. Then on another level, I have persevered a lot as well. So that's given me more confidence. But people who have not done that, they it's like it affects their self-esteem in a certain way. So I'm a person that I really don't have balance, and it's only certain times and certain moments where I'll think that something is gonna not work out. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or where I question, like my relationship with my partner. You know what I'm saying? It never doubt comes in my mind that she will leave me. I don't do nothing for her to leave, but I'm not perfect either. But it's only in certain moments where I'm concerned about whether I'm making her happy or not. Because my mind says she's happy because she's with you. You know what I'm saying? And what my friend was saying, and sometimes where I'm vulnerable, I question, you know what I'm saying? But it's so rare because I can't be a person that questions everything about myself, because for me that's not healthy. So that's why I say it's not a balance. It's only certain moments in space where I'll question certain stuff. But other than that, I'm trusting in who I am. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I'm trusting in who I am, and I'm always trying to get better. But in me having to overcome so much and haven't done it, then I have like a more of a belief in myself than most people have. So
Right.
people say that you seem like you're invincible, like you have everything figured out, but I don't. But that's how my demeanor is. You understand what I'm saying? So a lot of times I've had to step outside myself.
It's some empowerment to it, but it's always a growth to it.
Yeah. So it's like if you put a task in front of me, like I know the things that I'm not good at. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not a person that builds things. I'm not a person that's like a great dancer. You know what I'm saying? But I understand that there's different levels of intelligence, and it's like, it's like 7 different areas. But I know some areas I excel more than most people. But in other areas, I'm like in the negative, like dancing and like and like building stuff. Like I can do it, but I hate it. You know what I'm saying? But another, I'm a pretty confident person, at least on the surface. But I do question stuff, but you just can't see it.
So if people wanted to contact you and purchase your book, how would they do that?
Well, my book is on Amazon. You know what I mean? So they can just hashtag Journey of the Betta Fish, and a lot of different stuff will pop up. They can hit me on LinkedIn, Man Code Coaching. I'm also on Facebook, the Man Code Coaching. You can look me up on there. And those are the best ways you can do it on Amazon. But it's not only my book, but I also have sweaters that I have out as well. You know what I'm saying? And the sweaters, some of them represent the book. Some of them represent my journey. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the one with the woman and all the pictures on it. It's my different stages of my life when I was trying to fit in to something, whether it was a fraternity or whether it was religion or whatever it was, before I just came into the fact that I'm 2 things before I'm anything, or 3 things. I'm a father, I'm a Black man, and maybe it was just 2 things. You know what I'm saying? That's the things that ground me. That's the thing that I'm going to focus on the most. You know what I'm saying? Working on behalf of my people and working on behalf of my family, and everything else is not as important. But I have one that shows that growth. That's one sweater, but the rest of my sweaters is one about the book, but the rest of my sweaters are about Black fatherhood. So if anybody's interested in that, you can check them out on LinkedIn. You can check them out on the Man Code Coaching Facebook page, and because we can set it up and we can get that out there to you.
Wow. Andre.
Yes.
You are on the Truth Will Set You Free show. Give us a
Thank
truth
you.
to remember you by.
A truth to remember me by. I'm gonna say something that's like right at the end of my book. You know, I remember when there was times that people thought that they were going to take something from me, or they had the belief in themselves that they were gonna overtake me for whatever reason it was. And I remember at the point in my life, and it was after the situation on the bus, that I made the decision that anything that somebody gets from me, they're gonna have to take it. And in those moments, that's when I could harness, the ability to resist. And the more that I resisted, and the more that they realized that it wasn't gonna be easy to take whatever from me, then doubt started coming into their mind as whether they could do it or not. And the more doubt that set into their mind, then they started looking for a way out of that situation. And at that point, I was able to have my way with them. As a community, we've lost our desire to resist. And we have allowed people to come and put us in a situation that have become normal to us. No matter how dysfunctional it is, it's normal to us, right? And in these moments are the times that we need to resist. And the last thing I'll say on that is, united, we bargain, and divided, we beg. And that's the truth.
Wow. Thank you, Andre, for being on our show today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure. And you have to come back because I know you're not done writing.
You know what? A lot of people said that I should write some more stuff, but I don't know. Maybe I'll just let it.
Look, you don't have to know. I told you.
Oh, you believe that, huh? Okay.
Because you're so resourceful. It's a lot there. And the language that you use, it gets to the conscious that needs to be broken.
I think so too. But you know what? Also, have your viewers check me out on the Man Code podcast. If you want to hear me like in the rawest form, honest, it's unpolitically correct, check me out on the show. It's called the Man Code podcast. We do it on Facebook, and we also do it on Periscope. # the Man Code podcast, or Man Code podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.